Pamela and Ralph were a remarried couple. They shared the same beliefs and were also in-laws to each other. Yet, this marriage, which brought even more familial ties, ended in an unexpected way 5 years later. One morning, Ralph was found collapsed outside his home, while Pamela had died inside. After the incident, the surviving Ralph quickly claimed that their home had been robbed and reenacted the events at the scene. However, to the surprise of the police, Ralph revealed a bizarre detail during his account, claiming that the robbers had done something he found too difficult to mention. So, what exactly caused this incident, and what experiences had Ralph and Pamela gone through? In Wolfsburg, Colorado, USA, located in the central southern part of the state between the eastern Rockies and the eastern plains, the permanent population is about 3,000 people. It is a city within Weld County and serves as its county seat. The protagonist, Pamela, was born on the 27th of March 1965. She was a local of Colorado, leading a very simple life focused on religion and family. She was a full-time homemaker and an avid follower of Jehovah's Witnesses. Generally, Jehovah's. Despite this, Pamela was unable to change Jerry, who remained non-religious and avoided any church-related activities. This led to gradually worsening problems in their relationship, and they eventually divorced in 2010. As Jerry said, Pamela was the one who first proposed divorce, but it was Jerry who filed the paperwork because Pamela, due to religious restrictions, could not initiate the divorce herself. This was the only way for her to avoid violating her religious beliefs. In addition to Jerry and Pamela's divorce, two other significant events occurred in their family that year. Pamela's eldest daughter, Shannon, married a man named Alan, while Pamela herself married Alan's father, Ralph, her own father-in-law. In fact, Pamela and Ralph got married before their children did, but they kept the news hidden initially, waiting until Shannon and Alan's wedding before announcing it publicly. There were two main reasons why Pamela decided to marry Ralph. Firstly, they shared the same beliefs, and secondly, Ralph's wife, Dina, had left home 6 years earlier, and her whereabouts were unknown, making Ralph effectively a single man and meeting the requirements for remarriage. Secondly, Shannon and Alan's marriage was arranged by the church, and as their parents, Shannon gradually distanced herself from Pamela due to unresolved feelings, while Pamela and Ralph moved to the neighboring city of Wolfsburg, where they opened an antique shop and led a prosperous life. Perhaps because their lives were so comfortable, Pamela never considered reconciling with her daughter. After all, it was her own selfishness that had led to Shannon's failed marriage and damaged their mother-daughter relationship. However, one day 4 years later, Pamela seemed to change her mind and invited Shannon for a meeting. Unbeknownst to them, this would be their last meeting. Just a few days later, tragedy struck. On the 16th of January 2014 at 7:30 a.m., Farah, a neighbor living next door to Ralph, found him collapsed outside his house, with bruises all over his face and a visible wound on his head. He kept shouting for help. Seeing this, Farah quickly asked Ralph and learned that their home had been robbed the previous night. After the robbers attacked him and his wife Pamela, Farah immediately called the police. Upon receiving the report, the police and medical personnel arrived at the scene shortly after. Upon inspection, both Ralph and Pamela had suffered blows to before he could react. Someone hit him from behind with a stick, and another person attacked his face from the side. Caught between them, he quickly lost the ability to resist and collapsed, falling into a coma. When he woke up again, the intruders had disappeared, and Pamela lay unconscious on the kitchen floor. Ralph managed to crawl over and feel her cheek. It was no longer warm. He then went to the door and called for help from the neighbors. Ralph's account of what happened was quite straightforward. He lost consciousness immediately after the attack and had no clear memory of the attackers or what happened to Pamela. For these reasons, the police decided to take Ralph back to the crime scene, hoping that it would help him recall more useful details. Additionally, since Ralph had repeatedly mentioned that their home had been robbed, the police needed to determine which items had been stolen. Their home contained many antiques, and if the thieves had sold them, it could provide important clues. Before going to the scene, the police had already collected necessary evidence to prevent any damage to the crime scene. Ralph agreed to let them take photographs. They first inspected the living room on the ground floor and then took him upstairs. Ralph demonstrated how the attack occurred. For instance, the glass of the back door was damaged, which seemed consistent with an intruder entering the house, as Ralph had described. But the remaining glass on the door frame pointed outward, indicating that the glass had been broken from inside the house, not outside. There was also a blood-stained poker near the stove where Pamela died, clearly the weapon used to kill her. Strangely enough, the killer neither took the poker nor left it casually beside the body, but placed it back in its original position, which was highly unusual, unless the killer suffered from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. For these reasons, the police began to suspect Ralph, and he also realized their doubts, making the case even more dramatic. In the following days, the police conducted a thorough investigation into Ralph's background and his relationship with Pamela. Meanwhile, Ralph took action himself by publishing a 3,000-word open letter in the newspaper, describing a completely different version of what happened. In the letter, he blamed himself for not protecting Pamela and expressed deep guilt. He also stated that the attack occurred on Tuesday evening, 2 days before he reported it to the police. During this period, he was repeatedly beaten and assaulted by the criminals. At times, he held her hand tightly, but a few minutes later, she showed no reaction anymore. I called her name out loudly and started crying uncontrollably. Just then, the two criminals approached me with guns in their hands. I felt so scared and helpless that I even wet my pants without realizing it. Then one of them pressed the gun against me. There was a loud click as the trigger was pulled, but the bullet didn't fire. Only later did I realize they were just teasing me. However, my nightmare didn't end there. Soon after, they knocked me out again, and I didn't regain consciousness until Thursday morning, as the detective handling the case said. The content of Ralph's open letter completely contradicted the facts. His intention was clearly to explain the doubts raised by the police. First of all, the police had told Ralph that Pamela's death occurred much earlier than the time he claimed the incident took place. Therefore, Ralph used the open letter to alter the timeline, changing it from Wednesday to Tuesday. In addition, Ralph mentioned in the letter that the killers wore gloves with LED lights during the crime, in order to explain why no other fingerprints were found at the scene. He seemed concerned that the police might discover other fingerprints and start over. Ralph's open letter was highly illogical. It not only failed to clear his name but also deepened the police's suspicions. Through a thorough examination of the evidence at the scene, the police confirmed that no third person had been present. All the fingerprints and DNA samples belonged to Ralph and Pamela. Therefore, Ralph was ultimately identified as the killer. On the 7th of October 2014, 9 months after the incident, the police arrested Ralph on charges of murder. Although Ralph continued to deny any involvement and tried to shift the blame onto two local men with criminal records, Ramon and Cess, claiming they had sold the stolen jewelry after the incident. This strategy was unsuccessful. The police had sufficient evidence and also understood Ralph's motive. Ralph's religion emphasized the importance of family and marriage, but his personal life was very chaotic. He maintained long-term inappropriate relationships with at least 2 women, one of whom even crossed the boundaries of his 2 marriages. It is unclear whether Ralph ever considered marrying any of his lovers, but it is certain that his infidelities played a significant role in the occurrence of this crime. According to Pamela's daughter Shannon, Pamela had mentioned a few days before the incident that her marriage Ralph's infidelities had begun during his first marriage, and after Diana disappeared, her son Alan found her phone, wallet and the clothes she was wearing when she vanished in their basement. Therefore, it is clearly impossible that Dina ran away from home. It is more likely that, just like Pamela, she discovered Ralph's infidelity and was subsequently killed by him. However, since Alan was only 11 years old at the time, for various reasons he did not tell anyone about what happened. It was not until this case occurred that he mustered the courage to share the truth. On the 25th of February 2016, 2 years after the incident, the trial began. In the end, Ralph was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole.